strike here in Iowa City. A few weeks ago, we had a friend from Sweden join us. Greta Thunberg made it clear, we have a climate emergency now, and we must strike until adults step up and really act, not just talk. According to the IPCC scientists, we must cut emissions by 50% in the next decade. This means all institutions must declare a climate emergency. And this includes the Democratic Party. Last year, despite all of our great wind energy, greenhouse gas emissions increased by 3% in Iowa. Western Iowa has had 3 historic floods in 6 months. Farmers are struggling with their crops. And around the world, fires have raged from the Amazon to Alaska and now California. And yet, we're still hitting record levels of carbon emissions. The climate emergency must be the top item for the Democratic Party. And this is why I'm standing here. And this is why you must vote in the caucus. Raise your hand if this will be your first caucus as a voter. That's a ton of voters. Young people have taken the lead to wake up our nation for urgent climate action. And now, young people must take the lead to get a climate leader into the White House. In July, Senator Bernie Sanders was the first to introduce a climate emergency bill in the Senate. In August, he proposed the most ambitious climate plan to transform our economy. He would create millions of green jobs, return a commitment to environmental justice, and help farmers transition to regenerative agriculture. So, a lot of cynical people like to tell us young people that this is not possible. But last spring, when we started our strikes, people dismissed us and told us the same. After 3 months of our strikes, the Iowa City School Board passed a climate resolution in line with the IPCC. Then, we were told our strikes against the city council were hopeless. This past summer, after our strikes, the Iowa City Council passed a climate crisis plan in line with the IPCC. Now, we plan to get the University of Iowa to declare a climate emergency. And that means the university needs to stop burning coal now. No more excuses. That must be your slogan with the Democratic Party. Because this is a historic moment. This election will determine our future. And our generation must demand bold action and bold leaders. Greta told leaders of the world at the UN that she shouldn't be standing in front of them. But I am standing here today to support youth climate strikers. Bernie Sanders has called climate action a moral imperative. This is the kind of climate leadership we need today. We can't accept anything less. And this is the kind of climate leadership that will give our generation a chance of a future. Let's make Bernie Sanders our honorary youth climate striker. And please give a hand to all the Iowa City climate strikers. Thank you and never give up. Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Iowa City, how you doing? Hawkeyes, how you doing? It is always good to be back in the place that gave me so much, the University of Iowa. I want to thank you all for coming here tonight. I want to give a shout out to my good friend Kimberly Graham, who's running for United States Senate, to make Joni Ernst, to send her packing. All right. So I'm going to get right to it. And I want to start by echoing the sentiments of Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez when she praised the Democratic field of presidential candidates as one of the best we've ever seen in a generation. And I agree with her, and I applaud all of the women and men for running, for they have endeavored to be of service to this country in a time of great need. Now, while they are all qualified and capable, Senator Bernie Sanders is the best choice to lead America. For starters, Bernie Sanders is the most progressive candidate in the race, and only bold progressivism can save us from the Trumpian nightmare that has laid waste to this country. Now is not the time for incrementalism or for our candidates to be Republican light. We cannot afford to pursue the same failed policy programs of yesteryear, because when we do, we betray millions of Americans who are desperately hoping their politicians will find courage in this moment, because the people are counting on us. Progressivism is not new to Bernie Sanders. He's been on the right side of history for his entire career. In a world where political expediency often trumps conviction, his record of advocacy when it was hard is everything. And I say again, we will only move this country toward progress with courageous politicians who can inspire us all to act collectively for a better society. Bernie Sanders is courage and conviction personified, and we find testaments of this courage throughout his career, whether it was standing up for the rights of the LGBT community in the 70s or calling out the harm of money in politics throughout much of the last decade. His voice has been a consistent one, and this is why I trust him to do the right thing when the political winds are blowing hard against the sails. He's a man who cannot be bought. When he tells you he will not take PAC money or contributions from the fat cats on Wall Street, unlike other politicians, you can take that to the bank. So long as it's not one of those big banks that are harming democracy. Maybe take it to a credit union. He is consistent in his views, and he has shaped the current policy debate happening right now in this Democratic primary in profound and substantive ways. Years ago, when he was talking about universal health care, some Democrats laughed at the idea, obviously forgetting that we live in a country where millions of people lack access to health care, and 42% of people who are diagnosed with cancer go bankrupt within the first 2 years. But here we are. It is a new day, and now all of the candidates running for president are stumbling over themselves to produce some iteration of Senator Bernie Sanders' plan. So I offer you this. If you truly believe that health care should be guaranteed to all people in this country, that it should be a right and not a privilege, then there is no more debate. There's no more discussion. Senator Sanders wrote the damn bill. We have a blueprint. There are no qualifiers or disclaimers. It is the gold standard. Now, I speak to you today in the shadow of my alma mater, the University of Iowa. And when I graduated, I was hit with nearly $50,000 in student debt. And many of you here are incurring debt right now or are still paying it off just like me. But when we elect Bernie Sanders, if you have student debt, it will be canceled. And generations of Americans who pursue higher education at our public colleges and universities and trade schools will be able to attend for free. So we all know education is the great equalizer, and when we open the doors of higher education to all people, especially those who have faced great barriers to entry, we will rebuild our economy and inspire legions of women and men to solve the hard problems that we face. They will believe the science and apply their knowledge to address the climate chaos that endangers this planet, and they will do the other things. Senator Sanders is a friend and ally to all people, especially those in marginalized groups. This is one reason he's been able to build the most diverse coalition of supporters a presidential campaign has ever seen. And he's asking all of us, each and every one of us, to fight for someone you don't know. He's asking us to practice compassion and believe in the goodness of our fellow man and believe in the goodness of the people. This is why we're not organized around one single politician. Rather, we have come together around a mission to revolutionize our politics. So we understand that the journey does not end when Senator Sanders takes the presidential oath of office. In many ways, that is when it will begin again, and this grassroots coalition will be called upon to put pressure on members of Congress to compel them to pass the most progressive policy agenda this country has ever seen. And so, in closing, if we know one thing about the good senator from Vermont, let it be this: he is a dreamer, and this nation deserves politicians who can dream big. We cannot afford more piecemeal proposals that will be watered down even more during the legislative process, barely moving the needle. We need to reimagine America's promise, and we will only get there with a bold vision, one that points us in the direction of what is possible, and not in the way of what fearful politicians tell us might be politically feasible. We need a revolution in this country, and we need you all to be a part of it, because when we dream, when we fight, we will win. And so, my friends, it is with great pride that I bring to you the next president of these United States, the senator from Vermont, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank all of you for being here. Let me introduce you. She's still here, my wife, Jane, who is going to make a great First Lady. Let me thank Elizabeth Moen for her music. Let me thank Ayla Boylan for her remarks. And let me thank Massimo Biggers for all of the work that he has done to help lead the effort in this community to combat climate change and to save the planet. Massimo? All right. This is the generation that is going to bring about the fundamental changes we need. Guys, thank you so much for what you're doing. And let me thank Okay. Let me thank Stacey Walker. As you know, Stacey is one of the great political leaders here in Iowa, and I thank him so much for his support, and I thank him so much for his kind words this evening. What our campaign is about, and that's what Stacey is about, that's what Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is about, that's what Ilhan Omar is about, and that's what all of our support is about. What we are doing in this campaign is telling Donald Trump that he will not succeed in dividing our nation up based on the color of our skin, where we were born, our religion, or our sexual orientation. What our campaign is about and what the future of this great country is about is bringing our people together, black and white and Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, people born in this country, immigrants who came to this country. What our campaign is about is bringing our people together around an agenda that works for all of us, not just the 1%. And what Stacey Walker just told you is exactly what I believe. Not only do we have to defeat Donald Trump, the most dangerous president in the history of this country, a president who is a pathological liar, a president who clearly has never read the Constitution, a president who believes that he is above the law, a president who is a racist, a sexist, a homophobe, and a xenophobe. Not only are we going to defeat Trump, but we are going to do something more. We are going to think big, not small. And we are going to have the courage to take on the greed and the corruption of the corporate elite. And together we are going to transform our government and our economy so that it works for all of us, not just wealthy campaign contributors. Nelson Mandela said something very similar to what Stacey just said. And what he said is that, and I quote, "It always seems impossible until it happens." You all understand what that means? It always seems impossible until it happens. And then everybody says, oh, well, that's obvious. Should have done that years ago. The great threat that we face is not just from the power and the money and the greed and the corruption of Trump and the corporate elite. The great challenge that we face is overcoming the limitations to our imagination in understanding the kind of world that we can create. Now, people say that my agenda is radical. It is not. It's actually an agenda that working families all over this country want. But I will tell you what is radical. What is radical is when Trump tries to throw 32 million Americans off the health care they have. That's radical. It is radical when the drug companies charge us by far the highest prices in the world for the medicine we need. That's radical. It is radical when Trump and his friends give $1 trillion in tax breaks to large corporations and the top 1%. It is radical when Amazon, company that made $11 billion in profits last year, owned by the wealthiest guy in America, did not pay a nickel in federal income taxes last year. That's radical. That's radical. But I'll tell you what is not radical. What is not radical is to say that if you work 40 hours a week in America, you should not live in poverty. It is not radical to say we're going to raise the minimum wage to a living wage, $15 an hour. It is not radical to say that in this country we're going to have equal pay for equal work so that women do not make 80 cents on the dollar compared to men. It is not radical to say that workers in America have a right to join a union. It is not radical to say that our young people and all of our people are entitled to get all the education that they need to fulfill their dreams. It is not radical to say that we're going to make public colleges and universities tuition-free and cancel all student debt in America. What we have got to do is change kind of the way we think. 11 years ago, Congress bailed out the crooks on Wall Street. Congress gave them trillions of dollars in zero interest loans from the Federal Reserve. That's radical, but it is not radical to say that you have the right to get an education without having to pay off onerous debts for decades. That's not radical. That's the right thing to do. All over this country, in every major nation on earth, healthcare is considered a human right. And as president, we are going to end the international embarrassment of being the only major country on earth that does not guarantee healthcare to every man, woman, and child. The function of healthcare is not to make the drug companies and the insurance companies $100 billion in profit. The function of a rational and humane healthcare system is to make sure that when you get sick, regardless of your income, you go to the doctor. And if, God forbid, you end up in the hospital, you don't have to go bankrupt. The function of a rational healthcare system under Medicare for All is that nobody in America pays more than $200 a year for the prescription drugs they need. And I'll tell you what else is radical. It is radical right now that we have a fossil fuel industry that has known for decades that the carbon that they are producing is destroying our planet, is contributing to climate change. It is radical that they are prepared and do put their short-term profits before the lives and well-being of our kids and our grandchildren and future generations. What is not radical is what the young people here are doing, and that is saying to the fossil fuel industry that the future of this planet is more important than your short-term profits. And I am proud to tell you that our campaign has introduced the most comprehensive proposal to combat climate change ever introduced by any candidate for federal office. Now, I have been criticized because that proposal is expensive, and it's true, it is expensive. $16 trillion over a 10-year period. But I want somebody to tell me what the alternative is to saving the planet. What is it worth to make sure that our children and grandchildren live in a planet that is healthy and habitable? I can't put a price tag on that. But I damn well know that that is exactly the moral responsibility that we have to save this planet. And when we implement the Green New Deal, and I'm excited to be working with Alexandria on that issue. But when we implement that Green New Deal, not only do we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energies, but what we also do is create up to 20 million good-paying jobs. We are going to invest here in Iowa. Let me congratulate you all, because Iowa is one of the leaders in this country in terms of sustainable energy and wind energy. You are producing about 35% of your electricity from wind. You should be proud of that. But under our administration, we are going to invest tens of billions of dollars in sustainable energy, in wind, in solar, geothermal, in Iowa, in Vermont, and all across this country. And what our legislation does also, because it believes in justice, we put billions of dollars to protect the poor and the most vulnerable people impacted by climate change. Because we believe in climate justice. And what we also understand, and I wish I could tell you otherwise, but we could do everything right tomorrow in America, it still is not going to solve the problem because we're dealing at a global crisis. Well, I can assure you that we will have a president in the White House named Bernie Sanders who does not believe that climate change is a hoax, but who will help lead the world in transforming the global energy system away from fossil fuel. Stacey talked about our need to dream big. Well, here's a dream that I have. And my dream is that maybe when leaders of the world, and the young people all over the world, in Europe and Africa and Asia, Latin America, all over the world, when they understand the crisis that we are facing, my hope and dream is that the people of the world will say to their leaders, stop spending $1.5 trillion a year on weapons of destruction designed to kill each other. Let's invest that money against our common enemy, which is climate change. That is my dream. My dream is young people, working people all over this country standing up for good jobs, for an environment that is clean, and policies that will put an end to climate change and save the planet. And when we talk about some of the issues that are out there, I know that you share with me your horror that in the United States of America today, we have more people in jail than any other country on earth because we have a broken and racist criminal justice system. And I pledge to you that we are going to reform that system. We're going to invest in our young people in jobs and education, not more jails and incarceration. And as part of our criminal justice reform, we're going to end the so-called war on drugs. Some of you may have noticed that just yesterday, we came out with a program that will legalize marijuana in every state in this country. I find it hard to believe that we have crooks on Wall Street whose illegal behavior destroyed the economy, yet not one of those people has a criminal record. And yet some kid here in Iowa sells marijuana, he or she has a criminal record. Well, we are going to change all of that around. And not only are we going to legalize marijuana, we're going to expunge the records of those people arrested for possession of marijuana. And not only are we going to do that, we believe that those people, often people of color, who have been most impacted by the racist war on drugs, if we're going to legalize marijuana, those people and not large corporations should benefit and profit from the sale of marijuana. So we're going to help those communities get the funds they need to invest in their businesses. Other point that I want to make when we talk about crises facing this country is that together we will end the demonization of immigrants in this country. I am the son of an immigrant. My father came to this country from Poland at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket, never made much money, but became a proud, proud American. And I am sick and tired of seeing this president demonize people because they are immigrants, sick and tired of seeing people at the border have babies snatched from the arms of mothers and children put into cages. And my promise to you is that on the first day in office, we will once again provide legal protection for the 1.8 million young people eligible for the DACA program. And we will introduce comprehensive immigration reform, which leads to a path towards citizenship for the undocumented. And let me also tell you that President Bernie Sanders is not going to be intimidated by the NRA. We are going to do what the American people want us to do, and that is to pass common sense gun safety legislation. Just this morning, we had a meeting, and a woman got up and said that her daughter, little kid going to elementary school, said, "Mom, I want you to get me a bulletproof backpack." And all over this country, there are children and moms and dads who are frightened when their kids go off to school. That is not what this country can be about. So we are not going to let the NRA dictate gun policy in this country. We are going to greatly expand background checks. We're going to do away with the gun show loophole. We're going to do away with that language that allows people to legally buy guns and then sell them to criminals. And we are going to ban the sale and distribution of assault weapons in this country. You know, I get a little bit tired as a member of the United States Senate hearing many of my conservative colleagues go to the floor of the Senate and say that they believe in small government. They believe in getting the government off the backs of the American people. And then they have the nerve to tell every woman in America what she can do or not do with her body. I believe that a woman's right to control her own body is a constitutional right. I will never appoint anybody to the Supreme Court who is not 100% pro Roe v. Wade. We will end the Mexico City agreement so that the United States will be able to fund organizations around the world that believe in reproductive freedom. Let me conclude by picking up on what Stacey Walker said. And what this campaign is about is thinking big, not small. It is about having the courage to take on the greed and the corruption of powerful special interests who are only concerned about making billions more in profits, while working people are struggling to keep their heads above water. What this campaign is about is understanding that real change in America has never, ever taken place from the top on down. It has always taken place from the bottom on up. And that's why this campaign, our message is us, not me. If you look at American history, you understand that the labor movement was created when millions of workers, expressing enormous courage, stood up to their employers and said, you know what? We are human beings. You're going to treat us with respect and dignity. We are forming a union. If you look at the history of the civil rights struggle in this country, it wasn't just great leaders like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. It was millions of African Americans and their white allies and other allies coming together to say that we will end the abomination of racism in this country. 100 years ago, not a long time from an historical perspective, 100 years ago, women in America did not have the right to vote. They weren't going to the University of Iowa. They weren't getting good jobs that they dreamed of having. They were trapped. And these women said, you know what? We are not second-class citizens. And they stood up and they fought back. And you look at the history of the gay movement in America. We were here 30 years ago. Nobody here would have dreamed that gay marriage would be legal today in every state in this country. That didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen by a Supreme Court decision. It happened because millions of people in the gay community and their straight allies said that in America, people have the right to love anyone they want, regardless of their gender. So, brothers and sisters, that is where we are right now. We are living in a moment in history where we have more wealth and income inequality than at any time since the 1920s. We are living in a nation where 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of America. We're living in a nation where billionaires spend hundreds of millions of dollars to elect candidates who represent the wealthy and the powerful. Now, I know, because I'm a senator and I deal with these guys all the time, The 1% has enormous amounts of money, unlimited amounts of money, and they have extraordinary power. And I'm talking about Wall Street, and I'm talking about the drug companies and the insurance companies, the fossil fuel industry. I'm talking about the prison industrial complex. I'm talking about the military industrial complex. I'm talking about the whole damn 1%. These are very powerful people. But at the end of the day, 1% is 1%. And if we do not allow Trump and his friends to divide us up, if we stand together as 99% who believe in justice, who believe in economic justice, racial justice, social justice, environmental justice, if we are prepared to stand up and not just fight for ourselves, but fight for each other, to fight for people we don't know, fight for the people who are sleeping out on the streets tonight, the 500,000, to fight for the workers who are working 60 or 70 hours a week to try to put food on the table, to fight for those people who are dealing with $100,000 in student debt, to fight for women who want 100 cents on the dollar, not 80 cents on the dollar, to fight for the children in our country who are hungry, who are going to inadequate schools. If we are prepared to fight for each other, there is nothing that we cannot accomplish. 1% is strong, 99% is a lot stronger. Let us stand together. Let us stand together. Let us defeat Trump. Let us transform this country. Thank you all very much.